At the center of the story is a group of 150 passengers trapped on a plane with a dangerous biological weapon. The story begins in a bustling airport where planes are lined up on the runway, and the terminal is full of activity. Travelers hurry to board, afraid of missing their flights. Among them is a young man who stands out. He approaches the check-in desk and tries to find out which flight will be the most crowded. The attendant doesn't provide a specific answer, so the man heads to the restroom. There, he makes an incision under his armpit and hides a small metal container in the wound. After that, he washes his hands, noticing a little girl watching him from one of the stalls. She had entered the men's restroom because of a long line in the women's. The man approaches the child, but her father, the protagonist Yahyuk, suddenly appears. The father and daughter return to the waiting area, but the man begins to follow them, asking strange and persistent questions. After spotting their baggage tag, revealing the family is flying to Hawaii, the stranger buys a ticket for the same flight. He passes through security smoothly, despite a minor issue with his inhaler, which briefly catches the attention of the staff. The situation is quickly resolved, and the man boards the plane without trouble. Once all passengers are seated, the plane moves onto the runway and takes off. Meanwhile, Police Captain In Ho learns that his wife has decided to take a vacation to Hawaii. The captain can't join her, as he is tied to his work at the station. His colleagues show him a video threatening a terrorist attack. A suspicious-looking man with a sinister appearance promises to carry out an attack on a plane. In Ho and his partner head to the address listed in the case materials to investigate. At the location, they question local children who confirm the suspicions and enter the suspect's apartment. Inside, they find a horrifying scene. A decomposing body wrapped in plastic. The captain realizes the threat is real, and time to save the passengers' lives is running out. The investigative team searches the apartment. Later, they discover that the deceased died from some kind of poisoning. They also find numerous videotapes showing experiments on rats. A scientist is testing a virus on them, timing how long it takes for them to die after infection. The suspect is identified as Jin Seok. The police head to the airport to find out if he boarded a plane. The captain is initially relieved to learn that the suspect is flying to Honolulu, but his relief quickly turns to dread when he remembers it's the capital of Hawaii. On the plane, the mysterious passenger goes to the restroom and removes the container from his wound. Using it to charge his inhaler, he sprays the substance into the air. As he exits, he encounters the little girl again, who has been overtaken by a business-class passenger. The stranger comments that the girl is lucky and adds something else, but very quietly. The business-class passenger notices suspicious dust in the restroom and informs a flight attendant. Yahyuk sees a video of the terrorist threat on his neighbor's screen and recognizes the suspicious stranger who followed them onto the flight. Taking his daughter, he approaches the flight attendants to report that Jin Seok, a potential terrorist, is on board, carrying something hidden under his armpit, and that he later told the girl that everyone on board would die. However, all the crew can do is keep an eye on him. They also bring the pilots their meal to ensure they have the strength to complete the journey to their destination. In business class, a passenger suddenly feels unwell after using the restroom. While he vomits in the aisle, other passengers capture the scene on their smartphones. Among the onlookers, Jae-hyuk notices a smug grin on Jin Seok's face and accuses him of poisoning the man. A scuffle breaks out between them. Meanwhile, the pilots receive an alert about Jin Seok. True to his resourceful nature, the co-pilot, Ninsu, decides to check on the passengers. He arrives at the height of the fight, where Jae-hyuk reveals a fresh wound under Jin Seok's arm. Suspecting him of being a terrorist, the co-pilot politely asks Jin Seok to present his documents for verification. Realizing he has been exposed, Jin Seok attempts to flee, scrambling over seats and down the aisle under the watchful eyes of numerous smartphone cameras. As a group of volunteers restrains the overly aggressive passenger, he sprays the contents of an inhaler around the cabin before dropping it. The unhinged man is tied up, and the situation is reported to authorities on the ground. It turns out Jae-hyuk knows Ninsu, but their relationship is strained. As the co-pilot searches the restroom for evidence, the operational headquarters, led by the Minister of Transport, gathers on the ground. Ninsu reports that a substance has been dispersed in the cabin. Police link it to a dangerous virus Jin Seok had been working on. At the pharmaceutical company Brickham, they realize the virus has already begun spreading throughout the plane. Brickham representatives refuse to cooperate with the police, claiming Jin Seok was fired 4 years ago and emphasizing that the company is far known. To make matters worse, Jae-hyuk's overly chatty neighbor uploads a video from the plane online, triggering a media frenzy about a bioterrorism act. Jin Seok makes no demands and appears to be a fanatical madman. Shortly after being interrogated, he starts coughing up blood, showing signs of infection. The plane suddenly loses altitude, sending unsecure items flying and people crashing into the ceiling. As the aircraft spins on its axis, several passengers, including Jae-hyuk, rush to the cockpit, only to find the captain dead, slumped over the controls. Jae-hyuk and another crew member manage to move the body and stabilize the plane. By this point, Jin Seok has died, which Nyun-soo reports to the ground as he assumes command of the aircraft. News broadcasts begin covering the story of the virus-stricken plane, alarming passengers on board. They divide into separate sections, one for those without symptoms and another for those showing initial signs, like a rash on the hand. Jae-hyuk is forced to join the sick group because his daughter has dermatitis, and he cannot convince others otherwise. Those capable of administering first aid give the sick passengers antipyretic injections. As the plane approaches Hawaii, the Honolulu airport denies permission to land. The Minister of Transport fails to resolve the issue diplomatically, forcing Nyun-soo to turn back toward South Korea. Meanwhile, the relatives of the passengers are rushed to the airport in Seoul. Captain In-ho attempts to gain access to the Brigham laboratory, but is blocked by security. Later, he receives an anonymous call from a company employee, who reveals that Jin Seok has an inside contact at the lab. TOLIC track down the contact, but he escapes on a moped. During a brief chase through narrow Korean streets, they crash and the bloodied captain catches up to the fleeing suspect. It turns out the suspect wasn't Jin Seok's accomplice, but merely a co-worker. The former fugitive reveals that the virus was smuggled illegally from the Middle East, and that Jin Seok had previously tested it on humans to die, and one survived. This incident led to Jin Seok's dismissal. The police visit the sole survivor of the virus outbreak. The woman helps identify the type of virus, forcing Brigham to finally admit the existence of a vaccine. The operational headquarters dispatches military forces to the pharmaceutical company's office, but even then, the security team refuses to grant them access. The Minister of Transport personally negotiates with the foreign managers, promising to reduce potential legal penalties if they agree to cooperate immediately. Meanwhile, the infected airplane is flying faster than normal because the pilot, feeling unwell, fears he might not manage to land in time. It is revealed that there is another experienced pilot on board Jae-hyuk. Years ago, as a commercial pilot, he made an emergency landing against all odds, saving almost everyone on board except two flight attendants trapped under fallen luggage. In the tail section, one of those attendants was Nyun-soo's wife. Since that tragedy, Jae-hyuk has suffered severe anxiety when flying, even as a passenger. When tensions rise among the infected passengers, Jae-hyuk goes to the cockpit to assist his former colleague. Information arrives from the ground that a cure for the disease has been found. However, Nyun-soo's condition worsens, and he decides to attempt a landing at a Japanese airport. The Japanese authorities, however, firmly refuse to allow a biological threat to enter their territory. Air traffic controllers deny the plane clearance to land, but the pilot continues the descent and even deploys the landing gear. The situation escalates as Japanese Air Force fighter jets take to the skies. They order the plane to turn around, but Nyun-soo refuses. Even warning shots along the fuselage do not deter him. However, as the plane approaches the runway, a fighter jet flies head-on, prepared for a collision. Realizing he has no other choice, Nyun-soo pulls the aircraft up at the last second to save the passengers. He then collapses from exhaustion, forcing Jae-hyuk to take control, dragging the unconscious pilot off the controls as he redirects the plane back toward Korea. The Japanese government explains the situation on television. They cannot risk the lives of their citizens to save the passengers of a single plane. They also speculate that the virus in the passengers' bodies could have mutated, rendering the vaccine ineffective. This new information instills fear in everyone involved. Passengers on board and those on the ground fear that the vaccine might fail. Doubts spread among the country's leadership, which ultimately decides to ban the plane from landing to protect the public. Captain In-ho, unable to bear the uncertainty, goes to the lab and has himself injected with the virus to test the vaccine's effectiveness. Meanwhile, near the Seoul airport, demonstrators gather, worried that the returning plane could trigger a deadly epidemic. Receiving updates from the ground, those on board the plane begin to question whether they are endangering the lives of their loved ones. After a brief discussion, the passengers decide not to land but to divert the plane far out over the ocean. Jae-hyuk contacts air traffic control to inform them of their decision. To avoid a potential catastrophe, he warns the passengers to send final messages to their families as the plane turns and makes its last circle. Passengers record video messages saying goodbye to their loved ones. On the ground, their families stand with their heads tilted toward the sky, watching as the plane fades further and further into the distance. Meanwhile, the captain regains consciousness after receiving the vaccine. The cure works. The minister orders contact with the pilot to instruct him to land the plane, but Jae-hyuk has turned off the radio. In response, officials approach the passengers' relatives, urging them to call their loved ones on board and inform them about the cure. People begin frantically dialing numbers. In the dark cabin, with the lights turned off. The glow of smartphone screens gradually illuminates the space. As they read the messages, passengers cheer in relief. A flight attendant informs Jae-hyuk, who reconnects with air traffic control. After receiving confirmation about the vaccine, the pilot turns the plane around once more. It becomes clear that there is little fuel left, and the plane's speed is too high to land on a runway of insufficient length. Jae-hyuk decides to aim for a military airfield instead. Along the way, he speaks to the unconscious Nyun-soo, confessing that, despite the tragic death of his wife, he believes he made the right decision during the emergency years ago. Nyun-soo regains consciousness and reassures Jae-hyuk that he would have done the same, adding that Jae-hyuk bears no guilt. As they approach the runway, Jae-hyuk cuts the electricity and shuts down the engines. Gliding toward the target, he performs a sharp turn at the last moment to reduce speed. The plane circles again, riding the wind. Lowering the landing gear, Jae-hyuk attempts to land. At the last moment, he makes another loop, flying so low that the wheels almost graze the rooftops of tall buildings. To reach the runway, he reignites the engines, burning the remaining fuel, and on the third attempt, he lines up for a landing. The plane initially wobbles, but soon the landing gear makes contact with the concrete. Jae-hyuk deploys the flaps and engages reverse thrust. However, the speed remains dangerously high, and people on the ground scatter in terror to avoid the speeding metal behemoth. Inside the cabin, passengers grip their seats with white-knuckled hands. While Jae-hyuk's face contorts with tension, the screen fades to black. The scene transitions to a commission reviewing the incident. The Minister of Infrastructure and Transport announces her resignation, stating that she can no longer bear such a heavy responsibility. She struggles to understand what drove the terrorists to consider killing 150 people. Captain In-ho, affected by the virus's intensity, has not fully recovered. In the next scene, Jae-hyuk is walking with his daughter down a springtime street. They join the passengers from the plane, who are celebrating their survival. Leaving his daughter with some women, Jae-hyuk continues onward, greeting a recovered Nyun-soo along the way. Finally, he approaches Captain In-ho, who is nearly paralyzed but, according to his colleague, is slowly recovering. The film ends with a view of the minister sitting alone on a pier, reflecting on the final moments of the landing. The plane, having overshot the runway, rests in a field as passengers rejoice. Around them, the bright red and blue lights of rescue vehicles flash vividly in the dusk.